Put your seatbelts on and get ready for the ride. We're the freaking New York Jets, so we're built for this shit.
Hello, welcome to another episode of In the Trenches with Gang Green. I'm your host, Bubbs. Today is Tuesday, June 3rd. Hopefully everybody's having a good day so far today. This is episode 550 of the In the Trenches with Gang Green podcast. I thank you, as always, for joining me. For those tuning in on YouTube, make sure to please like and subscribe. Of course, appreciate all of those tuning in on all the different audio podcast platforms. And today we've got another New York Jets OTA practice to discuss and break down, as the media was out at one Jets drive out in Florham Park once again today. And we've got a lot to discuss, some practice notes to get into, some highlights, and of course, we'll break down the comments from Aaron Glenn, who spoke to the media. We'll also dive into some comments from Josh Reynolds and Quincy Williams as well a little bit later on. As always, though, before we begin, we've got to tell you about our podcast partners, starting with our friends over at BetUS, America's favorite online sportsbook. If you want to get in on any of the sports betting action, check out BetUS and use my link in the description of this video to get a 125% sign-up bonus on your first 3 deposits up to $2,000. The NBA Finals, NHL, Stanley Cup right around the corner. You want to get in on that? Check out BetUS, link in the description. Also, our friends over at SeatGeek, if you want any of the hottest tickets in sports or entertainment, check out SeatGeek. NFL tickets, you want to secure those. MLB season in full swing. Hey, it's concert season. It's the summer. You want concert tickets. Check out SeatGeek. They've got it all. Use promo code BUBSONSPORTS for $20 off your first purchase and get yourself out to some awesome events. And, of course, our friends over at Huga House. If you want any of their wide range selection of hats, sweatshirts, t-shirts, check out Huga House and use code BUBS for 15% off any purchase and get yourself some awesome Huga House swag. So here we go, episode 550. Thank you, as always, for tuning in. Appreciate the support so much here on a Tuesday program. The New York Jets hit the practice field once again today, and the media was back in attendance. So we've got another OTA practice here to cover in what is the last week of OTA practices. Next week will be your 3 days of mandatory minicamp. And then after that, you have that 40-day break, and then we'll be sitting here before you know it in July, late July, heading into August, dog days of summer. We'll be talking about training camp. Less than 100 days away from the NFL season, even less than that before you get the preseason kicking off. So day by day, weather's getting warmer. You can start to feel the start and you could start to smell training camp in the air, right? Preseason right around the corner, eventually the regular season as well. So always an exciting time here as the offseason begins to get a little bit more into the rearview mirror. So we'll start today with the highlights of practice, get into what actually took place on the field on offense and defense. And of course, as always, we will break down the comments made by Aaron Glenn, Josh Reynolds, Quincy Williams also spoke to the media. So we'll get to the podium there a little bit later on with some clips and break those down. As for practice today, we'll start with the offense. Justin Fields looked pretty solid today. Connor Hughes reported he went 6 of 6 in team drills, 5 of 7 in 7-on-7 drills. Still a couple plays where it seemed like he was holding on to the football a little too long. That has been a common theme with Justin Fields, that he's held onto the football a little too long. Of course, continuing to utilize his legs and move around and extend plays, which is all good. That's been something that Fields has struggled with his entire career. I think it's something that hopefully get better as we move into here the rest of the offseason stuff, and then eventually here into training camp. And eventually, once the season rolls around, you start to see some of that improve. Some of that's too a quarterback mind right now in OTAs. You know you're not getting sacked. You know you're not going to get hit. It's non-contact. So you could have that tendency a bit now to say to yourself, hey, I'm not actually going to get sacked. I can hold on to the ball a bit longer here and try and make something out of it because it's an OTA practice. In an actual game, I would be scrambling or I would have gotten the ball out. So you do have to take that stuff into account as well. It's not full-on game speed. Sometimes the play can be called dead. You continue to play on, and that type of stuff happens. So that's the good. Some of the things that Fields needs to work on. When you look at some of the completions he had today, got Garrett Wilson involved a couple times. Garrett actually had a great catch, which we'll touch on here in a second. He made one of the highlights of not just practice today, but one of the highlights so far that we've seen in OTAs. Was also able to get Mason Taylor involved, who has now put together what I think has been a really solid couple of practices. Yesterday, you saw some clips of him making some nice plays, which was good to see. Last week, you heard from the media and the reports that you got from practice that he was heavily involved, right? Finding the pockets in the defense. So Mason Taylor certainly been a positive. Fields was able to get him the ball today, especially during 7-on-7 drills. That was a connection that was having success. So that's the Justin Fields element. Again, it's OTA practices. He's only really throwing the ball 13, 14 times. Not a whole lot to take away from just one player, but that's what you've got from QB1. Tyrod made a couple nice plays. Adrian Martinez as well. Actually had a nice play to Xavier Gipson during 7-on-7 drills. So all the quarterbacks were having some success this afternoon out at One Jets Drive. Now, on to some of the highlights of practice and some of the things that really stuck out. We talked about Garrett Wilson and the Fields connection. That was once again on full display. Garrett today, jump ball, 50-50, kind of moss. Not really 50-50, more so just went up and got it. Not a great throw from Fields. It was high, but Garrett went up and just picked it off over Michael Carter II and completely mossed him. That's, of course, an impressive play. Hoping that we see the highlight, hoping we see a clip here from the Jets social media page here, whether it's today or maybe even tomorrow, because they always, post clips from OTAs. I'm hoping we get that because from the sounds of it, it was a very impressive play. And those are the type of plays that Garrett Wilson has made so far in his career. And those are the type of plays that you just love to see from Garrett Wilson, whether it's in a game or it's an OTA practice in June. Plays like that get you a little excited. So I'm sorry if I'm a little excited for a nice Garrett Wilson catch from Justin Fields on a Tuesday afternoon in June. I think that's a positive and something that's always good to see. Mason Taylor, like I said, had an impressive 7-on-7 drills. We'll get to some comments made by Glenn talking about his blocking, which I think was a positive development, what Glenn was describing, right, as a kind of a complete tight end here. But Taylor as a whole, I think so far this training or this OTA sessions, I think he's done a good job as a rookie here, right? Learning and developing. And so far he's put together what I would say is like a nice foundation to set himself up to continue to grow. Mandatory minicamp next week, the rest of OTAs this week, and then, of course, most importantly, into training camp in the preseason once you get into game action. Xavier Gipson, we talked about it, had a really nice play. They tipped the ball up to himself and then came down with it. So that was definitely a highlight. And sneakily here, Xavier Gipson has actually had a pretty solid offseason practices from that perspective. He's put together a quietly solid OTAs. Last week made a couple nice plays. In last week's practice that was open to the media, you saw some reports that he made a couple nice plays. This week made the highlight reel play today, right? We've talked about the Jets wide receiver room a lot. You have Garrett, you have Lazard, you have Reynolds. You assume, I'd probably say Reynolds will be your 2, Lazard will be your 3, and that's if everything stays the same. And then wide receiver 4 is kind of up for grabs. It's Gipson, it's Corley, you've got Arian Smith, you've got Tyler Johnson. They're all kind of battling for that 4th wide receiver spot. Gipson, who doesn't even have a guaranteed roster spot, right? I think has done some good things so far. And it'll be very interesting to see how that carries into training camp, because this is a guy that certainly regressed last year. Doesn't provide much as a receiver so far in his career, and definitely took a step back last year as a kick and punt returner after what was a relatively solid season from that perspective in his rookie year as a punt and kick returner. Last year regressed major in a big way. This year, if he doesn't have that special teams role, what's his role as a receiver? Would he make the roster? We don't know, but I think he's put together a strong offseason up to this point. And Arian Smith's speed continues to stand out. And that's, again, something that I think should be expected. As Glenn says, they're in underwear. Your speed guys, your track stars, those guys are going to stand out this time of year because you're going to be able to blow by. You're going to be able to show off your speed, not, have to, no physicality really, right? Smith, this has been a good start for him. We'll see how it carries into training camp and most importantly, the games. In terms of some of the defense, Rashad Weaver, good day today. Free agent signing, of course, 2 sacks, 2 what would be sacks today. Actually had a couple nice plays against Membu, so that was certainly kind of a surprise standout, I would say, from Weaver, right? A depth piece on this defensive line. Malachi Moore had an interception today against Brady Cook. Jalen Simpson had a pick 6 on the last play of practice, so the safeties getting in on some turnovers. A.Z. Thomas had a couple nice plays in coverage. And even Brandon Stevens, although Garrett had a good day today, there was not one nice rep from Brandon Stevens against Garrett. He had him stride for stride in coverage, which I think is something to note. Brandon Stevens, one of those polarizing free agent pickups, had an awful season last year after a promising start with Baltimore. Last year was awful. We've heard Steve Wilkes talked about their plan to try and help him. Stevens is one of the more underrated X factors for this team, filling in that cornerback number 2 spot, essentially trying to fill the shoes of DJ Reed, which is a big shoes to fill with his 3 seasons here and the season that Brandon Stevens is coming off of. Certainly someone to keep an eye on. But Malachi Moore, I just wanted to expand on him a second. I think there's a very good chance, especially if the Jets do not go out and sign any other safeties. Even if they do, I think there's a very good chance, maybe not right away, but Malachi Moore at some point this season, and even maybe as A.Z. Thomas as well, you're going to see those 2 guys in starting roles. But especially Malachi Moore, I think there's a legitimate chance this is a guy that can jump Tony Adams at some point in the season, maybe even before the season. I love that pick on day number 3. That was my favorite pick of day 3 of the draft. Good to see him make a play today. He just feels like a Glenn guy, just very intriguing option in that safety room. And one of those pieces that if him and A.Z. Thomas can pan out, plus you've got Sauce, the future is bright in this secondary with some of these pieces if they continue to develop. Or I should say just develop in general in the 2 rookies in A.Z. Thomas and Malachi Moore. And plus Brandon Stevens, of course, if he can get back to really his 2023 form after a awful 2024. And then you've got an all-pro in Sauce who, even in a down year last year, was still near the top of the league in many statistical categories. Some other practice notes, few skirmishes, few, almost fights, I should say, which is typical this time of year. It actually got to the point where Glenn had to step in, spoke to the team to kind of cool things down, get back to practice, get back to football. This is typical, of course, this time of year. You see this stuff all the time, especially in training camp. You're facing the same guys every single day. Weather's getting warmer. We're not in the dog days of summer. We're nowhere near that. That's like middle of August when you get to the dog days. But still, going against the same guys, not full contact, things like this happen. So get the boxing gloves out. Couple physical, almost fights today. All right, so those are what took place on the field today, or on the grass, as Aaron Glenn likes to say. Now, to get to some comments, get to the podium here, I want to start with Glenn. Glenn, this was kind of just his opening remarks today, his thoughts on the team's competition, their competition level, and where he feels they are at in the last week of OTAs.
First thing comes to mind is this is the last week of OTAs. And I actually said something to the players about this, man, just how quick like this thing goes by, and the sense of urgency of getting the discipline details and competes at a level that we want to be. And the players totally understand that. So our sense of urgency of trying to make sure that we're above board in all three of those deals, the players get it. So each day we go out, man, we go out with a purpose. We don't waste the day, and the guys are on point. They're on point. So I appreciate that as a coach. I know the assistant coaches appreciate it, but we still have a ways to go, and we understand that. But we're working our asses off to get to where we need to be, and I'm appreciative of that.
Glenn has, of course, talked a lot about the competition and the competing aspect, right? Mentioned that all the way going back to the owners' meetings with everybody's names written in pencil, and it also kind of popped up when you got the Josh Myers, Joe Tippmann or position battle, rather, that could potentially here be a story in training camp, although you guys know where I stand. I think many Jet fans stand. Tippmann should win that battle by a pretty long shot, and we haven't heard a ton on that since a couple weeks ago, but I think it also just shows how important, while it is practices in May and June for a first-time head coach in Aaron Glenn, for a first-time regime, for a new coaching staff, minus a few carryovers with guys like, Sean Jefferson, your wide receivers coach, but a completely new coaching staff, a new head coach. This time of year is huge. This time of year is very important to try and get the guys to buy in, to get your plan, start to lay the foundation and insert your plan into place, because once you get to training camp, that's where you really got to get the wheels rolling. New playbook as well for Fields. He talked about that last week as well. So this is really important time. Glenn kind of noted it there, how fast it's gone and how important it's been for them. And I think so far it's been positive. The reaction to the culture that Glenn is trying to build in terms of the players and the rest of the coaching staff, everybody seems to be responding the right way. And that's a good thing. And you hope this can carry into the few remaining practices, including mandatory mini camp, of course. And then ultimately, once you head into training camp and you've got that month and a half stretch before the season where you get rolling there. So thought that was an interesting quote there. And I think overall Glenn has been pleased with what he's seen out of the players. And I think the players have been pleased with what they've seen out of Glenn. And I think that's a good start. Does that mean the Jets are going 12-5? Does that mean Glenn's going to be here for the next 10 years? No. But it's a good start. And this is all we have right now to base what Glenn and Muji have done so far for this new regime. As I mentioned earlier, talking about Mason Taylor, I thought Aaron Glenn had a really interesting comment on him. Not so much talking about his receiving ability, but his blocking ability as well, which I think is something Jets fans should be excited about.
I think he's been doing an outstanding job in that aspect. And it's not just the pass catching, because that's what you guys see, and that's what you guys really think it's an moment. But it's the blocking, to me, is what really gets me going. Now, because I know what he can do in the passing game. But for him to come out and do the things he's doing in the run game, even though you can't do a lot of running because it's not a physical part of the season, but him understanding exactly what he's supposed to do and the position, the body language, the leverage, all those things. I really love that when it comes to the run game.
Definitely, I think an interesting quote there from Glenn. Right, we've coming out of college, we knew what Taylor's receiving ability is going to be. And his high IQ, his consistency, good hands. We've talked about all that. His ability to find the pockets in a defense and get open and be a legitimate safety net, safety blanket for a quarterback. In this case, of course, Justin Fields. But the blocking ability is another level. And if he can get to that and really round out his game, that's where you can really have something in your 42nd overall pick, in your second pick in this draft, in round number 2. And I also think this kind of goes into Glenn, who mentioned this the other day, no block, no rock. And this was in an article the other day, which is basically Glenn saying, you don't block, you're not going to get the ball. We're not going to get you in the offense. Like, you've got to be able to block. You've got to be able to do some of the dirty work. And then you can get the ball and make plays. And that wasn't directed just towards Mason Taylor, but the wide receivers as a whole. And you look at the guys that the Jets brought in, specifically Josh Reynolds, he's a guy that is a very good blocker. Alan Lazard, he's a guy that can be a willing blocker. Are they the best receivers? No, but they're guys that can be willing blockers. They're guys that can be physical on the outside, which is something that Glenn clearly wants. Now talking about Mason Taylor, something that he clearly wants and sees already, which is good. Not only can you be a good receiver, but also be a blocker. And for Taylor, it's huge because this is going to team that's going to run the ball a lot. And you need your tight ends to block, and you need your tight ends to be productive in those situations as blockers when you're running the football and you're ground and pound, which is still going to be the identity of this team. And I also think, too, that's why they still believe in Jeremy Ruckert. Glenn talked about it earlier today with Ruckert, where he says he still feels he has more meat left on the bone, talking about just his game as a whole, and another Ohio State guy, of course. And I think at this point, anything you get out of Ruckert's I guess a bonus, not a benefit, a bonus, because he's been such a non-factor. But if you can get Ruckert to be a solid, okay number 2, be a role player for this team, that's a plus. And another guy that's a good blocker. Jets like that. Aaron Glenn likes that. It's all under that physicality, compete, all that kind of umbrella. So I thought those were some interesting comments on Taylor, and I think you can really spread those out too with the rest of this team and how they're building it. I also wanted to play this clip from Glenn. This was Glenn asked about, Garrett and the help around him and teams double teaming him, and talked about the wide receivers needing to step up behind Garrett Wilson.
How critical is it that one of the veteran receivers like Alan Lazard, Josh Reynolds, or Tyler Johnson steps up and becomes like a number 2 target for you? Because I would imagine the defensive coordinator in you thinks Garrett Wilson's going to see a lot of double teams if one of those guys doesn't step up.
Well, listen, all of our guys are going to have to step up. I mean, it doesn't matter which veteran they is. There can be a young guy that can step up. Listen, we have guys that can make plays for us, and that's at every level, every position we have. Running backs, our tight ends, what we just talked about. We have other receivers that's going to make plays. So I'm expecting all of our guys that's going to be here, right, to step up and take the burden off Garrett. Listen, Garrett's going to have his chance of one-on-ones. Is he going to get double? Yeah, he's going to get double. He's a good receiver. But when you do that, that leaves somebody else in a one-on-one situation. And I'll take that with our guys all day.
He's right. These guys are going to have to step up. And the Jets themselves have a lot of belief, or seem to have a lot of belief, in this wide receiver room, right? I think they believe that Tyler Johnson could take another step. I think they legitimately believe in Arian Smith and his speed. And I do think they believe that the coaching staff can get more out of him. I don't know if they see anything in Malachi Corley, but he's still on the team. I don't think his roster spot's guaranteed by any means. We haven't really heard much about Malachi Corley, but he's another guy that, if he is sticking around, he's going to need to be coached up. He's going to need to do a complete 180 from where he was last year. I also think and you've heard this with Corley, and not to completely kind of reroute the whole topic here, but you do hear more about Corley. You heard some, you read between some of the lines and some of the tough stuff with Corley last year. It feels like his issues were more off the field stuff, maybe not so focused in meetings, not so dialed in with the film and the off the field stuff, not so much the on the field, but some of the off the field stuff led to not seeing the field much. We'll see if that happens. And if Glenn's and this coaching staff is as accountable as they seem to be so far, that's not going to last very long. But yeah, I mean, Garrett's going to get doubled sometimes. He makes a good point. It's because he's a very good receiver. I think also sometimes it's going to be if teams just don't trust the rest of the Jets receivers or believe that they can shut them down. But yeah, if Garrett is getting doubled, other guys are going to need to step up, or else it's going to be a very long season from a passing perspective, from a receiving game perspective. So this is, again, why I don't think they'll add anybody. And we'll see. I think training camp will be a big teller, and even more so some of those joint practices as well. Once the pads come on and you can really, even against other teams, those will be huge. But yeah, these guys got to step up. So that was Glenn on the other wide receivers. Think he was spot on with that assessment. He also talked more about Fields. He was actually kind of joking around. Every week they ask a question about Fields, and he continues to bring up the quiet confidence. So we've talked about that a lot. So that was Glenn earlier today. Now, 2 players also spoke as of this time of their recording here. Quincy Williams spoke to the media, Josh Reynolds as well. I believe the first time since he became a Jet, since the Jets didn't make their free agents available. We'll start with Quincy Williams. 2 clips here. We'll start with the first one. This is his take on what he's seen from Aaron Glenn so far.
Straightforward, honest. What I'm talking about, it ain't waiting until we get to the meeting room. It's honest and straightforward on the field so you can get it corrected right then. So you coming out not making the same mistakes. And then on top of that, it's one of those things where you know the expectations, so you yourself can challenge yourself and be like, did I meet the expectations? It ain't one of those things where he got to come in and say it again. He done already said what his standard is. And so when you watching film, now everyone's having their own conversation as far as like, did I meet the standard that he said today? So that's kind of like what we've been doing.
That's the common theme. And we're going to play a Josh Reynolds clip here in a second as well. Tell it like it is. The accountability, all that so far has been spot on from Aaron Glenn. Quincy Williams also, I thought this was an interesting and pretty good quote too. Pretty good, I guess, headline news, whatever, but spoke to Glenn actually for an hour and a half after he was hired. And this was Quincy on that interaction.
What's been the adjustment, into this defense in terms of your specific role as a linebacker?
My specific role, the biggest thing, Coach challenged me at the beginning when he first got the job, gave me a call. We had probably like an hour and a half conversation just on his vision, and then also me getting his vision to the players and stuff, so we was all on the same page. And then also he challenged me with a couple of things to work on this offseason and then to show it during the season.
Talked for about an hour and a half. Talked, of course, like he said, on some things that he could continue to prove on. Quincy Williams, Jamian Sherwood, 2 big pieces to this defense. Now, Josh Reynolds also spoke. Here is his first thoughts on what he's seen from Coach Glenn.
Find that other teammates ask you about him, what he means, what he thinks, what he expects?
No, because he's going to tell you what he means. And he's going to tell you what he expects. So, no, it's more of just curiousness on, how was camp, this that stuff. So,
how is camp?
We work. that's facts.
So kind of a funny interaction there from Reynolds. Similar to Quincy, similar to all these players. We continue to discuss it here on the podcast, but that's been the common theme. He's going to tell it like it is. He's going to make it clear. He's straightforward. All those things, honesty, all that stuff is great. And we even heard Fields discuss it last week. He didn't like the way one of the practices went, and he said it straight up after the practice that he hated it. He did not like it. That's what you need. Straightforward, accountability, honesty. It's not what this team has had in the past. And that's got to continue, of course. Right? We're only, 4 months into this? 5 months into this? It's got to continue. But so far, the signs are been positive. Josh Reynolds also spoke on Justin Fields and what he's seen from him. I thought this was an interesting quote here.
Obviously, it's early, but just your early thoughts on Justin Fields and just catch a pass.
He can throw it, man. He's got a beautiful ball. He's a smart quarterback. He's been picking up this offense pretty fast, and it's not easy. So, I'm excited to see how he kind of just continues to develop as the plays get a little easier, a little more recognition for it, and he's gonna be rolling.
I think that's a good development that he just kind of hinted at there. I was picking up the plays fast. Fields, right, last week mentioned he's learning the new offense, its adjustment. I think it's good to see that clearly Reynolds and just this offense in general kind of improving here as things go on. I thought overall today was, from what I saw and what we saw from the media, felt like a pretty solid day for the offense. And I think that's a good thing considering new offense, new quarterback, a lot of new pieces, implementing this, right? Fields never really played in this type of offense. He said that straightforward last week. So I think it's good. Continue to build that, go into training camp, continue that, and then, get ready here for the regular season. All of this stuff is very important. So that's that. Another OTA practice in the books. Let me know what you think in the comment section down below. What are your big takeaways from today's New York Jets OTA practice? We'll be back with the rest of the week here with a lot more content coming your way. So stay tuned As always, appreciate the support. And until next time, JETS, 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 Jets.